up for us. And so welcome back, everybody. Again, that was an excellent panel that we had. A lot of insightful things. So hopefully you enjoyed it. I know I certainly did. And now what we're going to do is we want to talk about Sumo with regards to security, monitoring, and analytics. And again, this is going to be another 2 hour of lecture and labs and an hour of certification. So we should get you out of here in 3 hours or less. So one other thing I'm going to do is I'm also going to show you the Cloud SIM environment just a little bit. Now, the Cloud SIM environment, like I said, we're working on the curriculum right now. We're going through some dry runs, and it will be introduced at our Illuminate conference, which is in the end of September, I believe the 28th and 29th of September. And you guys are, of course, welcome to attend. It's going to be a virtual session, and we're going to have a whole bunch of classes, including those new Cloud SIM classes. But I am going to show it to you anyway. I thought you guys might enjoy it. I'm going to turn off my camera just so we can get back kind of into our mode. As we said here in this class here in this session, because it's a more advanced class, we're going to pretty much do this by the labs. But I'm going to give a little background here. And actually turn that slide off. Sorry about that. Again, we talked about the Sumo Logic Continuous Intelligence Platform this morning, so I'm not going to rehash that slide. This slide I will hash because it's a new one. So here, when we think in terms of security, and you think in terms of security maybe within your company, within your university, and that sort of thing, there's typically three phases of it. The first phase is, of course, audit and compliance, right? So you will have dashboards and various other things to see how am I doing with regards to my compliance, right? And again, you'll typically take the data from your environments and, am I in compliance with all kinds of things in higher education? I'm sure, student loans, the safety of your students. I mean, there's a lot of areas of compliance here. So that's one aspect where Sumo Logic can help you. Another aspect, and what we're really going to focus on more today, is security analytics. We're going to write some queries and do some searches and do some dashboards and alerts and things like that so that we can see what's happening. We're going to write queries. So earlier this morning, we wrote a query to see some data. Well, now our queries are going to be focused specifically on the aspects of security. And I'll be honest with you, our environments here are mostly AWS, but we do have some labs for Azure. So depending on which cloud environment you're in, you can play, and I'll show you where all those labs are. The other thing is that if you're not on a cloud environment, again, you can still do these exercises. It's just going to be a little bit trickier because, again, you need to know where those fields are in your logs. Then the last aspect of Sumo Logic security solution is our Cloud SIM solution. Now, SIM, for those of you who don't know, stands for Security Information and Event Management. And so a little over a year ago, we acquired a company, and we have integrated their product into our product. And so this is the piece that I'm going to show you guys a little bit of, and this is where the training is coming from. So I'll give you a little heads up into that Cloud SIM solution, and I'll do that as I finish up the class here, okay? So we're going to talk about all three of these things. But again, as far as security analytics, we're talking about creating some queries, building some dashboards, and you'll find that in our product, we've got a bunch of advanced analytic operators that we're going to use and that we're going to walk through here, all right? So ourselves a good time. Now, if you would, I would appreciate it if you could all log back into the Sumo Logic training environment. So again, if you go into service.sumologic.com, and again, if you remember that 3-digit number you had before, if you all would log in with that 3-digit, the Training Plus Analyst, and that 3-digit number, and again, the password is August 21, exclamation mark. So if you all would log back in and go to town here, we will resume and get with the program. So speaking of getting with the program, if you will, you may recall that I previously went out to our help documentation, right? That documentation, the URL was help.sumologic.com. And in help.sumologic.com, in the first chapter, there is a section here called Quick Start Labs and Tutorials. This is where all of our labs and tutorials are. Now, This hands-on labs, cloud security monitoring and analytics, these are the 8 labs that we're going to do. Okay. So these are the 8 labs that we're going to do, but these labs are all centered around AWS. If your university happens to be using Azure, or your company is using Azure or whatever, we have some labs that we built for Azure, same sort of labs, just some different labs that you can play with. And again, you can play with these labs anytime you want to on our training environment. So our training environment has all the logs and all the data you need for this. I don't know what your organization Sumo Logic environments have as far as logs and data. That's why we recommend you do this in our training environment. In case anybody needs it, I'm going to take the URL here for our labs, and I'm going to go ahead and post it in. So here are the labs we are going to do. There you go. All right. And if anybody needs me to give you the URL for the Azure labs, I certainly will gladly do that if you need it. So just let me know. So that being the case, I'm going to take this tab and I'm going to pin it up here. So again, I can switch back and forth, excuse me. So I can switch back and forth between my Sumo Logic environment and my labs. Okay. That's what we're going to do. Now, in the case of our labs, I'm going to start with lab 1 here. We want to monitor our user activity. In fact, what we're going to do with these labs is these labs kind of all build on one another. So we want to see our top 10 AWS activity based on the user's information. We want to see who's logging in. And we're going to write a query to do that. So basically, we're going to take and create these fields. Now, I could, of course, start copying this code and pasting it, and I'll do that later in the course, but it helps to kind of understand where this code is coming from. So if you all would follow along with me, I would appreciate it. So if I'm going to grab a new log search, and of course, that's where things start for us, a log search. And what I want to do is I'm going to grab the metadata tag source categories we talked about before, because we've got everything arranged in a source category. And specifically, I'm going to go to labs/AWS/CloudTrail. So I'm going to use my CloudTrail data from AWS. And when I run this data, by default, it's looking at the last 15 minutes. I'm going to change this to, hang on a second, 24 hours. There we go. I want to see the last 24 hours, and I'll rerun it. So for the last 24 hours, I have 264,471 fields here that I can use. Excuse me, 264,471 log messages that I can use. And these log messages are in JSON format where they've got a key value, a key field, and then a value. So my event version, and then the version number of that event, my event time and a timestamp, my AWS region, whatever the value is of my AWS region. Now, what I want to do is I want to take a couple of these fields and I want to parse them out. So if I go back to my direction, the first field I'm going to grab here is user identity.username. So if I open up user identity here, I can see I've got a whole bunch of different fields here, but I don't have username on that first message. But on one of these messages, I am sure I will. Of course, it's never easy. Okay. These usernames don't exist on all things, so just bear with me. I'm going to come back to that one in just a second. I'm going to take my event type. Now, the way we extract these event types is, again, I go down here and I look for, come on. There it is, event type. There we go. If you want to add this and parse this field out, you can simply right click on it. And then you say you want to parse selected key. That will add the line of code needed to parse this field out. Okay. Gregory says he doesn't have the link to the labs. I thought I just posted it up. Bear with me a second. I will do that now real quick. Sorry about that. Here is the link for the labs, Gregory. And again, we're going to lab number 1. Okay. So hopefully that gets you going. No problem. Thank you for asking. Okay. So I've grabbed this line. The only thing is that I want to rename it. Okay. So the field is called event, capital TYPE. And I want to call it event type with an underscore. So all I have to do is add to it a as clause. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to add an as clause. And I am going to type that value in. Now, when I add that as clause, when I run this, you'll now notice I have my field name, event underscore type, and then here are in fact my values. Okay. Then I'm going to also grab my source IP address. So back in here, I'm going to go find my source IP address. There it is. I'm going to right click, parse selected text, type in as, and I'm going to call it SOCIP, which is what they have in the book. So now I've extracted out my event type and my source IP. Now, I'm down to 264,920 messages because some of my messages don't have a source IP or an event type. Now, earlier I mentioned about going into user identity, and I want to try to find that user ID. And so a lot of my messages don't have that particular field. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this code and I am going to, I'm going to go ahead and copy it. This one line of code, I'm going to go ahead and copy it rather than trying to search for a particular log message that has user identity.username. Okay. It's just easier. And I could put it first, I could put it last. The order really doesn't make any difference. But now when I run this, these fields are going to parse out, and I'm now down to 66,993 messages. So I'm only grabbing those messages that have a user ID in here, username in here somewhere. So I'm going to extract out the username because I want to identify who the user is. And again, here's their username, but we're going to call it actor. Okay. And again, these fields are listed here alphabetically. So regardless of what order I put them in, they're going to be listed here alphabetically. So all I'm doing is extracting out certain fields. Any questions or problems with that? All right. So that's what we're doing for the first 3 steps. In fact, they want us to go ahead and also grab the event name. So we're going to go ahead and add the event name. So again, I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to look at a message and I'm going to find my event name and I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to parse selected text and I'm going to add an as clause because I want it spelled even, EET underscore NEME. So it looks that way. So here I've got my event name, my event type, my source IP, and my actor. Again, it's all alphabetized. Now, what I want to do is I want to start filtering. And I want to create something called the parameter. And there's 2 ways I can do this, okay? One, I can take this code and I can copy it and paste it. Or 2, basically, what I want to do is I want to add a where clause. So I'm going to add a new line. Again, that's a shift enter and alt enter, depending where you are on the keyboard. Type in where. And then my field name here is called event name. So I want to filter on event name where it matches. The matches operator means I'm going to do a string match character for character. And I'm going to call my parameter by the same name as my field name. Now, this really doesn't do anything. I'm saying something matches itself, okay? What I want to do is turn this right here, this field, into a parameter. And you'll notice that when I don't select anything in here, I don't have anything typed here. But if I swipe over any part of my query, specifically this event name over here to the right, I have the option to create a parameter. And if I click to create that parameter, it now brings up my manage parameter settings. Now, what do I want to call this parameter? I want to call it probably event name. Okay, same as my field name. And then as far as its default value, I want to put in here a star because I want to see all of my values. A star is that global wildcard star that we can use. And I'll talk a little bit more about this panel in just a little bit. But when I click save, you will now notice that I have this little parameter with a star over here. And if I run this, I now see all of my values, 67,000 messages, and I see all of my various event names. Now, if I want to select and copy one of these values, these event name values, I can copy it, copy that selected text. I can replace the star with that text. And when I run this, now I'm down to 860 messages, and all I'm seeing is that particular event name. Okay, so we can create a selector that lets us select which event name that we want. Now, there's one piece of this that's missing. And the piece that's missing is, I'd love to, if I got rid of the star and I backspaced over it, I'd love to see a pick list, a selection of my different event names. And if I go in here to my parameter settings, we will do that in just a little bit in these settings down here, but stay tuned. So I have added, I have added per my, oh, I'm sorry, I want to do event type, not event name. That makes more sense to me. Okay, so let me change this to event type. I want to filter by event type. And again, just to make this a little bit more appropriate, because I made a typo here. Let me go into my parameter. Change this to event type, sorry. So now I'm filtering based on my event type. And when people log in, they log in one of two ways, two different event types. One event type is they make an API call, and that's how they log in. The other is going to be a console login. So these are the two different event types that people can log in with. Okay, I know the data, therefore I know that answer. So I have made a parameter here that lets us filter and select what event type I want to filter my data for. And by the way, in these parameters, I could hide that, the code, if you will. And so all my users can see this, and they can then pick the value that they want, and it allows a great deal of reusability. Some people might be worried about people who log in through the console. Some people might be worried about API calls. So they can use this to select the particular value that they want. If you want to open this back up, you can click on this little icon right there, and that opens your query back up. Now, there's two ways to create a parameter. One way is I type in my where clause, and then I create my parameter from that. The other way that I can do this is I can just type it all in at one time. So I have my, my event type there. What I'm going to do is I am going to filter based on my actor. And so I'm going to add a where clause where actor, that's what I called my username, matches, helps if I could type today. And then I'm going to type in two braces, two left braces, the word actor, two right braces. That creates for me my parameter. So I don't have to swipe over it and create it. It created my new parameter. The only thing I have to do is make sure that I define the default value to be a star. The star, again, means I want to see everything. So now, when I run this, I can filter by a specific user. I remember earlier I saw as an actor, Gosha. Gosha has logged in a couple times. So I could type in Gosha here if I want to, and it shows me all the times that Gosha has logged in. I could log in as the different actors here that I have. But again, a star gives me back everybody. So we have added some parameters to this. Make sense? We good so far? I'll take that as a yes. All right. So as we continue our lab, there's a couple more lines they want us to do. So here in my lab, if I can get there we go. I'm going to copy this section. So I'm on step 9, and I want to count by actor, event type, and event name. Then I want to see the top 10 actors by event type and count. And then I'm going to do that transpose command. But I'm going to do these one at a time. So let me go ahead and go back to my query. Let me add a new line, again, by doing an Alt-Enter or Shift-Enter. Let me paste this code in. There we go. And I'm going to comment out these last 2 lines. If you ever want to comment out a line, it's 2 forward slashes. I like 2 forward slashes in a space. It improves readability to me, but 2 forward slashes is all you need. Later on, I'll show you how to comment out a whole bunch of lines simultaneously. So now when I run this, that count is now created my aggregates tab. And I said, count by actor, event type, and event name. And so here I have my count of actor, event type, and event name. And I've got about 9 pages of this. By the way, one other thing on the aggregates tab, you'll notice on the aggregates tab, here's where I can create my bar charts, my column charts, and all that stuff. On my messages tab, I can't do that. They don't have those, okay? So on my aggregates tab is where I can do that, and you might see that again real soon in the form of a test question. So I wanted to point it out to you. There's also some settings here in case you need to change properties or change settings. Now let me go ahead and remove out this comment. And what this is going to do is this is going to look at my top 10 actors based on my event type and based on my count. It's really going to base it on my count. So here I'm looking at my top 10 users based on their event type. So for example, if I look here, I might see Gosha listed twice because one event type is AWS console sign-in, one is API call. So that's why I'm seeing Gosha twice here. Then what I want to do is I want to do that transpose command that we talked about earlier this morning. And in the rows, I'm going to put actor. And in my columns, I'm going to put my 2 different event types. And then, of course, in the middle, I'll put in my numbers. So when I run this, I now have a display where I see my actor, how many times they logged in using an API call, how many times they actually signed into my console. And in the case of Joe Schmo here, Jay Schmo, they haven't done any API calls, okay? Same with Mike and same with Suraj, okay? Now what I want to do is in my directions, I want to turn this into some sort of a chart. Okay. So here's what your code looks like. And now what I want to do is turn this into a chart. So I'm going to turn this into a bar chart. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my bar chart icon. And now I have bars to display what's going on. And of course, here's my legend where if I want to, I can control what I see based on my legend. Additionally, in my settings and properties over here, I can change my properties and maybe, my school colors are red or something like that. So I want to use different shades of red. I can certainly do that. And I want to change different shades of red. Now, in some graphs and some visualizations, I can conditionally format it. So if it's greater than or less than a certain number, it shows up in green or yellow or red or that sort of thing. You can do that as well. But here, I just simply want to display it in red. And I'll be honest with you, I don't particularly like red as a color. Red to me means something I really need to focus on. But that could also be an indicator here that, gee, I've got something I need to focus on. By the way, down here where it says colors by value range, here's where you can specify that red, yellow, green type stuff if you want. Now, our next and last piece of this before we call this lab done is, well, actually, there's 2 things we got to do. We're going to customize the parameter with a lookup table. So remember, I've got these two parameters, and if I get rid of that star, I really want to see a pick list, okay? I really want to see a pick list. Now, good news. In the case of event type, I have already created the query that gives me that pick list. In fact, if I go down here to step 13, in about the middle of the paragraph, it talks about this shared / event types. This means that this lookup table is put into my shared library and its name is event types. So let's talk about that. Let me go back here to my query. Let me go into the properties of my parameter, manage my parameter settings. I want to set the values for this parameter. And you'll notice here, there's a lot of different ways I can do this. I can create some text entries that I type in. I can create some label value pairs if I want, or I can use a lookup. We are going to use a lookup. So I'm going to select lookup. Then it says, what lookup file am I going to use? Here is where I could type in or paste in that /shared/ and as I start typing in, you'll notice that it shows me, here it is. In my shared directory, it found a lookup table called event types. And I'm going to select that. So we ran a query months ago to create this. And we scheduled that query to run every hour. So it updates. Now, in that lookup table, there is a field there called event type. And that's what I want to display. So I'm going to select that event type, that field from that lookup table. And now when I click save, let's see how this works. So when I go to event type now and I backspace over my star, I now get a pick list. I can now pick the various event types that I want, and the user will be able to see this as well. And they then can filter this data. So I want to see the console logins, and I can rerun this. Or again, I can put a star in there and see everything. So what we did is we incorporated a pick list. Now, a little later on, we're going to do that with Actor, but we're actually going to build the pick list. You and I are going to do that together in a later lab. So we'll show you how that pick list, that lookup table came to be. But that is step 12 and step 13, where we modified that. And now we can change and pick the various values that we want. So now what we want to do is we want to build a dashboard. We want to add this to our dashboard. So if we go out here, and again, the only time you can add the dashboard is under the aggregates tab. There is no option under the messages tab, right? Under the aggregates tab, I can add this to a dashboard. And this panel title, I believe they want us to call this panel title top 10 user activity. And I'm just going to swipe over this and I'm going to copy it, paste it. And then as far as your dashboard, we recommend that you type in SOC, which stands for Security Operations Center. And maybe you want to type in your initials. I recommend you put in your initials, makes it easy to search for. And then I am going to also put in today's date because I do this fairly frequently. So I want to make sure I can keep track of my different things here. Okay. And basically it's asking me, do I want to create a new dashboard? And yes, I do. I want to create a new dashboard. If I want to, I could select the new dashboard user interface. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to go ahead and add it in my personal directory, and I'm going to click add. And so lo and behold, it has now added for me this new dashboard. And we're going to go through a series of exercises. We're going to build out this dashboard. We're going to add other panels. After we do that, then we'll worry about sizing it and changing the theme and all that fun stuff, okay? But let's add some content in here, okay? So that typically takes care of lab number 1. I'll talk about these filters in just a second. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Okay. There's a couple of review questions here to kind of get you in the mood for taking the test. JSON field equals raw source IP address is SRC IP. This extracts the source IP address and subsequent values as it appears in the incoming logged messages. Is that what it's going to do? True or false? What do you think? Give me a clue here. Answer up. Type in the chat. Whatever you want to do. If you don't type in or help me out here a little bit, I'm going to go into my serious monotone voice and put you right to sleep. Okay. Hopefully you realize the answer to this question is in fact true. Okay. So it is true. Excellent. Thank you, Derek. All right. Question number 2, double curly brackets enclosing a variable label are used to create parameters. Is that statement true or false? That statement is true as well. Thank you very much. Excellent, Derek. And then I use the setting icon in the messages tab or message tab to change the color of the bar graph. Is that statement true or false? Okay, Derek says false. He's absolutely correct. Everyone else can play, okay? Nobody rides the bus for free. You're absolutely right. It's not the messages tab, it's the aggregate tab. So it's the aggregate tab. Remember, there's no settings under messages. Actually, there's a settings icon here, but that is about exporting the data, okay? So let's move on to lab number 2. In lab number 2, we want to create a query which shows us where people are logging in from. And so we're going to use that geo lookup that we saw this morning. Okay, I'm going to use that geo lookup that we saw this morning. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and again, we're going to use the same CloudTrail data we used before. So I'm going to take this code just to save some time, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to create a new query, a new log search query. I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to change this to 24 hours, change my time to 24 hours. And again, why? Because I want to see who the user is that logged in, the event type that logged in, the IP address they logged in from, and then I want to get the results of whether they successfully logged in or they failed to log in. So my result field here, which is a new field, will show me either success or a failure. And again, this is in my response elements section over here, and whether or not I succeeded or failed. Okay, so that's a new field for you, but not too tough. Now, what I want to do is I've got this information in here. Life is good. I can see my results. I want to create my parameters, and I also want to filter my data. I do not want to see any case here where I don't have an actor or I don't have an event type. So I could magically add a where clause and test for event type equaling null and actor equaling null. So that's what these 2 lines of code are basically doing. So we're making sure they're not as empty or they're not null. And so I'm going to add these 2 lines of code in here. And that's going to get rid of any nulls, any filter, any values where I've got no actor or I've got no event type. Okay. And if I wanted to, I could do the same thing with IP address, right? If IP address was empty. Now I want to create my parameters. Okay. Want to create my parameters. So again, if I look here at step 5, I've got my 2 little lines of code here that I can copy and that I can paste, and they're exactly the same 2 lines of code I had in the last query. And when I create these, because the brackets are there, it's automatically going to create for me my parameters. So here are my parameters. Again, when I run this, I want to make sure I put a star in this one as a default value. And I want to put a star in this one as a default value. And now when I run this, I see all my event types and all my actors. And if I go into my event type and I tell it to use that lookup table, I don't necessarily need to do this, but I will. Again, I want to use a lookup table. Again, from that lookup table, the one I want to use here is /shared/event types. There it is. And then the field that I want here is the event type. That's what's stored in my file there. And that's going to give me the ability in this query for event type. If I backspace over, I now get my pick list. Okay. Now we're going to deviate here a little bit. Now we're going to do some sort of lookups and basically see what's going on. So this is very much like the last query. In fact, you're going to find all of our queries pretty much look the same, except for the last few lines of code. So here, what I want to do is I want to add this line. And this line is my geo lookup line. And this is how I can set up a map. So I'm going to copy this line and I'm going to paste it in here in my query. And the way this line works is we have a partnership with a company called Newstar. And this URL points them to Newstar. Now, whenever you read a lookup command, you actually read it starting at the end. So here, I'm going to take the source IP that I got from up here. I'm going to pass it in as the IP address, sending it to Newstar. Now, Newstar is going to give me a latitude, a longitude, a country name, a city, and a region. And in order to display this as a map, I only need three things: my latitude, my longitude, and my count. I don't need country name. I don't need city. I don't need region. But maybe I want to display that in my data down here. So down here in my data, I can see here's my actor, my city, my country name, my latitude, my longitude, and all that stuff. Now, there's one other thing I need to turn this and be able to basically turn it into a Mapbox plot. I need to count. I need to have latitude, longitude, and count. So if I look at my next line in my code example here on step 8 of lab 2, I'm going to count by my actor, my source IP, my latitude, my longitude, my country name, and my event type. So I'm going to add that line in here. I'm going to run this query. Now, because I've got a count, that creates my aggregates tab. And because I have a count, I have a latitude, I have a longitude, I can now turn this into a Mapbox plot. And this little icon right here, if I click on it, lets me render this as a Mapbox plot. Now, the first thing you might notice is, well, gee, here's the world, and here's the world, and here's the world. Why am I seeing 3 copies of the world? That has nothing to do with this. It's a matter of X and Y axes. My Y axis is so long, it's spread out and given me 3 versions of the world. If I were able to stretch this out and make it a little higher, it would scale out and show me only 1 version of the world. In fact, when I add this to the dashboard, it's going to show me 1 instance of the world, the Western Hemisphere, the Eastern Hemisphere, and that's it. Okay, so this is just a rendering issue with regards to X and Y coordinates. Don't let that bother you. Now what I want to do is I've created my map. I want to add it to my dashboard. So I'm going to click Add to Dashboard. And now I'm going to give this dashboard a name. The name we want to call it is my CloudTrail Geo of Sign-In Activity. This tells me where my users are signing in from. Again, I could call it anything I want to, but that's what we're going to call it. And then here, as far as my dashboard, I want to grab the same dashboard that I grabbed before. So SOC, JWM, whatever you called it, and then today's date. So I put today's date in mine. You may have just called your SOC with your initials. That's fine. But I want to add this to that dashboard. Now, when it goes to that dashboard, it says, look, you got some parameters in here, and those parameters are already in that dashboard. And I'll show you those parameters in just a minute. But it says, do you want to rename these parameters because you don't want them to be the same? Or if they are the same, and they are in our case, you simply want to add the panel. So I'm going to click Add Panel, and it's now going to add this panel in here as well. There is my map of the world. And these parameters on my dashboard, I can click on this blue funnel. And here on this blue funnel, if I go to Event Type and I backspace over my star, I get my pick list. And I could select whatever I want to here. And this changes my panels. So I can filter my panels based on this information. Okay, let me go back to my console login here. So I can see data from both of these. There we go. So I can see where my users are logging in from. And by the way, in here, when I get done editing it, I can actually drill in and see and break down things. Actually, let me just show you real quick. They say done editing. I can go in here where I've got 411, now 311. I can look on the East Coast and see where are my folks logging in from. And so I can see where they're logging in from and break it down if I need to. Okay. And I can move things around and I can shrink this down, all that good stuff. By the way, on my actor filter up here, if I backspace over that, I don't have a pick list. We did not set that up yet. Okay, we will in a little bit later. So again, this is my dashboard. I'm editing it. I can add things to it. Again, I can make these smaller, bigger, whatever the heck I want to kind of tell the story. Any questions so far? Okay, so we got these dashboards. Things are running. Things are good. Okay. Now, it says here, there's a quiz here. It says, lookup uses CrowdStrike data to provide latitude and longitude. Okay, that's false. I haven't talked about CrowdStrike. We have two vendors that we deal with here. Newstar provides us our latitude and longitude from our lookup command. For those of you familiar with CrowdStrike, CrowdStrike lets me send an IP address to them, and it will tell me what the threat level of that IP address is. So if it's a known bad actor and stuff, I can see all kinds of good information about that. You'll see that in one of the later labs, being able to use a lookup command to grab CrowdStrike data. But in this case, lookup uses Newstar data to provide latitude and longitude, not CrowdStrike data. So that statement's false. Statement number 2, I can display a map without aggregating data. What do you think? Is that statement true or false? Can you display a map without aggregating data? Remember the 3 things you need to display a map with, right? So Derek is saying false. Derek is absolutely correct. Remember, you need latitude, longitude, and count. And I can't get count without aggregating. So number 3, I can use add panel to add to an existing dashboard. Okay. That one's kind of an innocuous question. Well, we would change that question if I could, because in our new dashboards, which this is the legacy dashboard, but in a new dashboard, you could add a panel if you wanted to, and you could add another query from that panel. So that one I'm going to throw out, and I'll tell you it's not on the exam. So what we're building here, if I jump on to lab 3, is a series of panels, which each represent a query that tell us different aspects of our security information. So in lab 3, we are going to look at our top 10 number of failed login attempts. That's what this is going to show us. Because again, if we're getting a lot of failed login attempts, either there's a training issue that we need to help folks log in properly, or maybe we're having some sort of an attack. So I want to see who is failing to log in. In fact, when I was an IT manager, I used to look at my authentication logs all the time, because there were certain people who were notorious. They would change their password on Friday, they would forget it on Monday, and they would lock out their account. And rather than waiting for them to call me, I thought it might be a little bit better customer service to proactively see them and say, oh, did you change your password? Oh, be a little proactive here, help them out. So again, this lab looks very much like we're used to. So I'm going to grab data from my CloudTrail data, my AWS CloudTrail data. I'm going to take this code. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to add a new log search query. I'm going to paste this code in. I'm going to go back for the last 24 hours. And I'm going to run this code to make sure it runs. So far, so good. Then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to create my filters and my parameters. So again, I'm going to take this code. I'm going to copy it. Going to add my lines, paste it in. Now I've got my parameters. Again, I want to make sure the default value here is star. The default value here is star, so that this can run. Again, I am going to add my where clauses here so that I can make sure I don't have any null or empty actors and event types. And then I'll talk about this other code that's part of this code segment. So let me add these 4 lines of code. And let me comment out these last 2 lines for right now. Now, if this code right now without the commented lines looks familiar, because we just had it. We just did it, okay? It's not done in the last lab. Now, what I want to do is, remember we capturing this result field. And I only want to see results field where they failed. So I want to filter out and say, I only want to see results where results have failed. And I only want to see where that occurred when people tried to log in. So AWS console log sign in means they tried to log in physically on my environment. The API sign in was when they did it programmatically. So I am filtering for only failures and only that they tried to log into my console. They're trying to log in through my operating system. So that's going to filter my results, and I'm down to about 77 results, although it's still going on here. So this is going to give me, this is going to give me a listing of my results. Now I want to format this, and I am going to create a time slice operator and count and aggregate and a bunch of things. So let me take this code, let me copy it, let me go in here, let me paste it, okay? This time I'm going to comment out these 3 lines, and I'm going to do it all at one time. If you want to comment out a whole bunch of lines in your code, it's really easy to do in this tool. In fact, I'm going to comment out almost all the lines. The way you do it is, if you're on a Windows keyboard, you hold the Alt key down. You put your cursor up here in the query area, you hold the Alt key down. If you're on a Mac keyboard, you hold down the Option key. There you go, Option key. And in either case, your cursor should change to a plus sign. Then with that plus sign, if you drag a line down, whatever you type is going to be typed across all of those lines. And in our case, to comment out, we comment out with 2 forward slashes. That comments out those lines. So that's an easy way to comment across a bunch of lines of code if you want to. Probably the most valuable thing that you've learned in this class, okay? Now, I'm going to comment out these last 2 lines just because. And this time slice operator, as we talked about before, is going to create for us time slices. And in this case, 1H means 1 hour. So out of my 24 hours, it's going to create 24 buckets, 24 time ranges that I can use. And then I want to count by my time slice, by my actor, by my event type, by my event name, by my result, which of course is failure. So I'm filtering for failure. So here I can see my various time slices. Now these time slices are not in any order, okay? So I can either put them in order, or if I use certain functions like transpose or outlier or top or bottom, it automatically puts them in the right order. So my next line is, I only want to see the top 10 actors based on the time slice, the event type, the result, and the count. So now when I run this, I am now seeing here are my users, and here's that time slice, and they're all actually in order. And then here is my event type and my result of failure and my count. Now, truth be told, I really don't need event type, I don't need results, and I don't really even need count. So the next thing I'm going to do is I can add some code in here that changes and decides what I want to display. And that command, as I talked about before, is called the fields command. So here in my fields command, I can say I want to see actor, I want to see time, time slice. And I want to see time slice. It helps if I can spell correctly. And that's really all I need. So when I run this, that fields command is going to only display those values. And then if I want to, I can then add this to my dashboard. Or if I wanted to, again, I could, make some sort of a graph or some sort of a visualization out of this. So here, aggregating my data over time, then we can add this panel to our dashboard. And again, the panel name is going to be top 10 failed login attempts. By the way, when I look at this top 10 failed login attempts, maybe I do want my count back here to see if anybody really had a serious count. So let me go back in here and throw in my underscore count. Okay. So, maybe I need to talk to Kevin and see if Kevin was, make sure he was just having problems trying to log in. Kevin looks like three times in this 1 hour. That might be suspicious to me. But I am going to add this to my dashboard. And again, I'm going to call it my top 10 failed login attempts. And again, I want to add it to my existing dashboard. So I'm going to find my existing dashboard. Helps if I type things incorrectly, like SOC, JWM, and then, of course, today's date. And that's going to add this to that dashboard. Again, because there are parameters in here, it's saying those parameters already exist. Do I want to add the panel? Yes, with the same names, or do I want to rename them? I don't want to rename them. I want to add them with the same name. So now I've got a third panel in here. And if I want to, for example, here I got Kevin. I'm starting to see that, Kevin's had some issues trying to log in. Maybe I want to go into my filter here, and maybe I want to change my actor from a star to Kevin. And if I run this, I can see Kevin's top 10 activity here, where Kevin is lining in from. And again, a little bit more information here about Kevin having problems trying to log in. Kevin's account may be compromised because he's failing to log in quite challenging there. Okay. So hopefully you're starting to see the value of what we're building. Okay. And that takes care of this lab. Quiz here for you. Adding a wildcard in the parameter window means it will filter out everything. Is that statement true or false? It won't filter out anything, right? We're saying give us everything, right? We're not filtering anything out. So that's false. Time slice groups my incoming data into chunks of time. Is that statement true or false? What do you guys think? That statement is true. And then the following line of code here, pipe, where not is empty actor, filters out logs that do not have any actor. And hopefully you all know that that statement is true. Okay. That statement is true. All right. That takes us here to lab 4. And my question for you guys is, because I'm going to give you a break somewhere here between lab 4 and lab 5. Do you guys want a break now, or would you guys like a break after we do lab 4? It's up to you. I'm easy. What would you like? You want to break now or you want to break after the lab 4? Anybody can answer. Don't be bashful. Okay. Okay. One person says now works for me. Somebody says they're good. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and take the 10-minute break now. So ladies and gentlemen, if you would all come back here in about 10 minutes, I will see you back here and we will resume and get going. Okay. And then, like I said, after this, I'll also show you the CloudSim environment. So let's take a break and I'll see you back in 9 minutes and 49 seconds. Thank you. Okay, hopefully we are back and we are in fact ready to go. Okay, so lab number 4 basically is going to take, and what we're trying to identify here is usually if somebody fails to log in and fails to log in and fails to log in and then suddenly logs in, right? That might be an indicator of a brute force attack. Somebody is trying to brute force log in, because all I need to do to break into your environment is I need to know 2 things. I need to know a username and I need to know the password. Now, the username is fairly simple. Most cases, it may be your company's email or whatever. So if I know your username, I'm 50% there. Now I get to figure out your password. Okay. And so this is some of the issues that companies, of course, deal with. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump down to step 3. Actually, I'm going to actually scroll down, if you don't mind, to the end. Okay. And I'm going to take where it says the entire query should look like this. And I'm going to walk you through this, but most of the code is stuff that we've seen before. So let me copy this code. Let me go out here and grab a new log search. Again, change this to 24 hours, paste this information in. Now, all of this stuff right here, all this stuff right here is stuff we've done before. The parameters, the fields, the results, all of that stuff. So what we're doing here is we're going to try to create an account of how many times we had a result of success. So we're going to create a new field here called success count. And if the result was success, we put a 1 in there. Otherwise, we put a 0 in there. Then we're going to create a field called failure count. And again, if it's failure, we put a 1 in there and a 0 in there. And then we are going to count these things up. Let me do this, if you don't mind. Let me go ahead and comment out these last couple of lines. And let me run this. So the first one with successes count, if I look in here, hang on a second. There we go. Oh, I'm sorry. Helps if I put a star in here. There we go. Star, 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 John, the other star. There we go. So what I'm seeing here is I have a field called successes count. And if my result was success, a 1 goes into successes count. If I had a failure, which I hope I can find here real quick, maybe I can, maybe I can't, a 0 is going to go in there. Okay. Just jump to the end here and see if I get lucky. Come on. Okay. Well, it's decided to kind of hang me out. So let me put the other statement in there, the failure count, which again is going to count my failures. Then what I want to do here is I want to sum my success counts as successes, my failure counts as failures, and again by time slice, actor, event type. So here in my aggregates tab, I have my time slices. Again, they're not in any order. My actor, my event type, and the number of successes and failures. Now, as I said before, if I've got a large number of failures and I've got less number of successes, that is an area where I might have a potential brute force attack. So I want to get rid of anywhere where failures is equal to 0. I don't care about no failures. So let me get rid of those rows to make it a little easier. So now I can see where my failures and successes are. And the good news is this all looks pretty good, right? I'm expecting to see a high number of failures and a small number of successes. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my failures divided by my successes, and then I'm going to multiply it by 1,000 to give me a failure percent column. So I'm adding a failure percent column, and that high failure percent column would be an indication of maybe something gone wrong. And again, these are all fairly low, okay? They're all fairly low. So this might be, again, a high number here would indicate a potential brute force attack. And if I wanted to, I could even put a filter in here where failure percentage greater than 10% or 20% or whatever, just to get a sense here for what's going on, okay? And basically what we're going to do is we're going to add this panel, this query, to our dashboard. Again, SOC, JWM, whoops, let's put a space in there, JWM, and then today's date. And again, now I've added this query to here. So this dashboard is starting to fill up, starting to provide some good information here. And again, I can select what actors and or what event types I want. One question that usually gets asked, and that is, I've got this one actor and this one event type will affect all these different dashboards or these different panels. What if I don't want it to affect? I can go into the settings icon here and I can decide which panels I want or not want affected. So you can control that if you want. Okay. So that takes us to the end of this lab. Okay, and again here, this line, JSON field equals raw / event type is event type, is going to allow us to grab that particular field from our JSON logs. And then statement number 2 here, question number, that statement's true. Statement number 2, excuse me, if a result matches failure count, return 1, that's a failure in this example. That statement is also true, right? If I have a failure, I'm going to put a 1 in there. Otherwise, I'm going to put a 0 in there. And then again, this time slice 1H, you're grouping your incoming logs into 1-hour groups so that you can look at data over time. And that statement is also true. And this brings us to lab 5. And I'm going to warn you, lab 5 has a lot of code. Lab 5 is really a son of a gun. And what lab 5 is going to do is it's going to look up when a user logs in. I want to look at all the user's history of logging in over a period of time, and we'll arbitrarily say 24 hours. And I want to see if they've logged in from someplace else where it doesn't make sense for them to get in here. In other words, if I log in from, say, Bedford, New Hampshire, which is where I live, and then I log in from Boston 3 hours later, that's fine. That's a fairly close distance. But if I log in from the East Coast in Bedford, New Hampshire, and then 2 hours later, I log in from California, little alarm bells should go off in your head saying that doesn't make sense, right? So in here, we're going to have to do some IP address lookup to see where the latitudes and longitudes are. We're going to use the backshift operator to go back in our logs to find the previous event where the user logged in. We're going to use some conversion to be able to look up IPv4 and convert that to a decimal. We're going to use all kinds of fun stuff here. Now, one little thing. There is a test question where it wants you to put this thing in the right order. And my advice for you, if you get that test question, is go to this lab. This is the lab 5, detecting land speed violation. Look at this diagram, and this is what you're going to put in the right order. Because this is really what's going to happen here. This is the process that happens. And to me, I don't know about you, but whenever I learn to write code, and keep in mind, I'm a computer science grad of a long time ago, I write it in pseudocode. So this is one of my contributions to this course. Because there's so much code to this, I broke it down into chunks and said, what is it that I need to do? And what is the process that I need to do as far as breaking things down? And that's why these notes are there, okay? This is kind of the pseudocode for this. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go scroll down here to the very end of this, where the code actually exists. So it says your final query on step 11 should look like this. And I'm going to take all of this code and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to walk you through this code. Okay. So now we're definitely stepping into the deep end of the pool. So I'm going to paste this code in. I'm going to change this to 24 hours. Okay. And let's talk about this. Okay. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at my CloudTrail data and I'm grabbing the user name, the source IP address. I'm going to call it user instead of actor. And I'm going to sit there and specify and grab the IP address. I'm going to call that IP address. Okay. The no drop means that I'm not going to drop anything that doesn't have either a user or an IP. Then I'm going to look and see, I've got a parameter here where I'm going to match where the actor matches whatever actor I want to filter for. And I want to make sure that the IP address, we have a function in Sumo logic called is public IP. So it's going to look at the IP address and only allow me to see those IP addresses that are designated as public IP addresses. So the 192.168. Those are going to go away, right? The 10.10s are going to go away. So I'm only going to see public IP addresses. The other ones are private. Then what I want to do here is I am going to look at the first message time, the earliest message time, and I want to look by user and by IP address. So I'm going to look at the first message time. I'm going to call that login time by user and IP address. Then I am going to sort by user and login time. So I keep track of all the times a particular user has logged in. So that's kind of my preliminary information. Then I'm going to take the IP address and I am going to convert it to a decimal. And there's a reason why. Then I want to use this backshift operator. What the backshift operator does is it takes us back to the previous incident, the previous IP address of that user. So I want to look at where the user is now. I want to go back to the previous entry for that user, the previous IP address. And I also want to go back to the previous time. And I'm going to call that previous login. Because when I'm looking at this, I need to know the two IP addresses. I also need to know the time difference of when they logged in. For example, if I log in from New Hampshire and 2 days later I log into California, that's perfectly fine. So again, I need to know the time and I need to know where you're logging in from. And again, when I get, there's no back, I can't go back any farther, I filter that stuff out. Now, this looks like a real son of a gun. It's really not. It is not that difficult at all. Remember, we took the IP address, which is in octets, 122.168.1, whatever. We've converted that to a decimal number. What we're doing here is we're taking that number and we're converting it back to octets so we can display it. That's all we're doing is we're basically raising it to a 256 power and placing it in one of the four octets. And we concatenate these octets together to display this previous IP address. Okay. Now I'm going to look up the latitude, the longitude, and of the first IP address. So your original IP address, I'm going to look that up, latitude and longitude. I'm going to call it lat1, long one. And then I'm going to look up your previous IP address. I'm going to call that lat2, long2. And I'm going to filter where any of these are null, because it means you didn't go someplace. Then I'm going to use the Haversine formula. Now, with the Haversine formula or with these lookups or anything else, you could always go out and do a Google search, Sumo logic, Haversine, and there it is, the Haversine function in Sumo logic. Now, what the Haversine function does, it's really quite simple. It calculates the distance in kilometers between a latitude and a longitude. That's all it does. So it's calculating a distance between latitude and longitude between, like I said, two different latitudes, two different longitudes. That's what the Haversine function does. So the Haversine is calculating my distance. And we're going to call this distance in KMS, kilometers per second. Then I'm going to take your login time minus your previous login time, and I'm going to divide it by this nice $36,000 million number, or whatever, to calculate it into hours, right? Take a number of seconds, you divide it by 60, it gives you minutes, divide it by 60 again, it gives you hours. Well, that's what this is all about. Then I want to calculate the distance divided by the login change time to figure out what your apparent velocity is. So how long did it take you to go and move that time? And of course, I'm going to filter out where the apparent velocity is greater than 0. So if you logged in from your house and you logged in from your house and you logged in from your house, your apparent velocity is going to be 0. I don't want to see those. Okay. Now, the rest of this, I'm going to comment out for right now. So let's see what we've got first. Again, I'm going to hold down my Alt key or my option key here, and I am going to drag a line down, and I am going to comment out all those lines, and I'm going to run this. And let's see what we've got so far. So right now I'm seeing, here's my IP address, here's my login time. Now this login time is converted to a long number. And then here I'm looking at my IP decimal value. It's because I want to basically go back and be able to backshift. And there's my previous IP address. And so I'm going to convert this back to my previous IP by calculating the octets. I can see when I first logged in what country I'm in. I can see what country I'm in when I logged in the second time. So I can see that I went from China to somewhere else in China, and I went a distance of 1,547.87 kilometers in, basically 1/100th, 1/1000th of an hour. Okay. So what I'm doing here, like I said, is I'm calculating how fast or how far I'm going. Then here in my query, I'm going to set an arbitrary value. I'm going to set a value of 500 as a suspicious speed, because anything over 500, if it's greater than that, I want to flag it. I want to filter it. So the ones where I'm sitting at my desk where I may have moved 10 feet or whatever, don't care. The ones where I've gone more than 500 kilometers per hour, those cause me concern. And then here, actually, let me go and run this so far. So now I've added my 500 as suspicious speed, and I'm adding this where clause. So down here, again, here's my suspicious speed, and I'm filtering where my apparent velocity kilometer per hour is greater than 500. By the way, as you all know, if I take a velocity and I divide it by time, and it's dividing it by 0, that means this value becomes infinity. We'll talk about that in a second. Now what I want to do is kind of organize things. I want to clean up this display. So here I want to concatenate their IP address and their previous IP address and create a field called IP addresses. And all I'm doing is I'm adding a new field to my query at the end, which lists your two different IP addresses, separated by, a space, line, whatever. I'm also looking at the countries that you're in. And if your country 1 and your country 2 are the same name, that's great. I'm going to display just once. If there are two different names, I want to display country 1 followed by a comma, followed by country 2. So I'm going to decide here what I want to display as far as my countries. So again, I'm adding more information to this query. So here, somebody went from the United States to Belgium. Somebody went from the United States to the United States. I'm going to say it once. Somebody went from the Russian Federation to the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've organized this a little bit. Now, the last thing I want to do is I want to clean some of this stuff up. I don't need all of this information. So again, I'm going to use that fields command to show me the user, the IP addresses, which I just created, the countries, which I just created, the distance in kilometers per second, the login time delta, and the apparent velocity. So I'm going to get rid of a lot of this stuff that I don't need to display anymore. So here's my user. Here's the IP addresses they move from. Here's the countries they move from. Here is their velocity and their log time delta as far as how long it took. And then, of course, here's their velocity in hours. Then I'm going to filter out anywhere I don't have a user. And if I have a situation where it displays infinity, that's because the time difference was 0. And when you divide by 0, you get infinity. So I'm going to filter that stuff out. And then finally, I want to sort by the highest level of velocity. So those are the ones that I want to see, okay? So when I run all this query, this long and involved query, what I'm seeing now is here's my user. Here's the two IP addresses they logged in from. They went from Brazil to Korea South and within the last 24 hours, and this is the distance. And this is the delta, and I can format this so it displays it as a number. And this is the velocity they went through. Also, within those 24 hours, Kevin also went from Korea south to Brazil. So apparently traveling back and forth between South Korea and Brazil twice in the last 24 hours. And so here's where I can see where they're going from and to. And so I can see if I have, obviously Kevin's moving fairly fast. And Kevin's using such a velocity that it doesn't make sense. He shouldn't be able to go from Brazil to Korea within 24 hours, maybe. Maybe I want to change this time frame, maybe bring it down to 6. But I want to make sure that they're not traveling, they're not going an impossible distance, okay, in a short period of time. So this is my land speed violation query, and it's a very popular one, because you want to see if somebody logged in from 2 different IP addresses that are geographically separated, and they shouldn't be able to get there within that time frame, right? So this is a handy query that everybody seems to love. And again, I can add this to my dashboard, okay? So on the quiz here, and I'll add this to my dashboard in a second, on the quiz here, geo lookup receives an IP address and returns a location. It returns a latitude and longitude. That statement is true, right? The Haversine formula is used to convert octets to decimal. That statement is false. The Haversine formula is used to compute the distance in kilometers between 2 different latitudes and 2 different longitudes. And most importantly, land speed violations allow you to detect suspicious user activity. And that's exactly why we did this. So let me add this to my dashboard as it is right now. Again, this is, I think we call this possible land speed violations. And I want to go out here to my dashboard, SOC, JWM, and then today's date, and I will add this to that query. Now, the only parameter that's here is actor. The other parameter I didn't add, I didn't need. So, but I'm going to go ahead and add this to my panel. So now my dashboard's looking pretty fat, right? Got lots of queries in here, lots of things I can lay out, lots of fun I can have. All right. Now that brings us to lab 6. And in lab 6, all we're going to do is we're going to do that lookup. Remember earlier we said actor didn't have a pick list for us, right? Actor didn't have a pick list. So we're going to show you how to create a query that is going to give you a pick list of all of your possible actors. In fact, here is that query. We're going to look at our labs AWS CloudTrail. We're going to extract out the field of username. We're going to call it actor. We're going to count by actor. Then we're going to remove the field of count. That's what this field minus sign does. It removes a field. And then I'm going to save this. And I need to modify this statement right here so that I can give it a proper name. So I'm going to take this code. I'm going to copy this code. And I'm going to go out here to my log search. I'm going to paste it in. I do want to change this to the same time frame, 24 hours. By the way, let me comment out these last 2 lines just so you can see what's happening. And so what I'm doing is I'm seeing a list here by count, by actor, and how many times they have, how many times they're in this log, okay? And what I want to do, as I said in the fields, is I want to remove the count column. So I'm going to go out here and say fields minus underscore count. That gets rid of my count column. Now I want to save this listing of my users. So I'm going to go out here. I'm going to uncomment out this line. And I'm going to add my initials here. Now what this is going to do is this is going to save this lookup. That's what the save command does. And I'm going to save this in my shared directory. I'm going to call it JWM underscore AWS underscore actor underscore list. In fact, I'm going to copy this. Now, when I run this, I'm going to get a strange message. Oh, you're trying to not run a query. You're trying to save a file query. So do you want to run this? Are you sure you want to do this? Because now you're going to save something inside of Sumo Logic. And yes, I ran it. My results are there. Life is good. Now I can go back to any of my earlier queries where I have my actor parameter. And in here, I can go back and manage my actor parameter. And I can tell it I want to select a lookup. And the lookup file, I can paste this in if I want to. Shared JWM actor list right there. And then in here, the only field that's there is the field called actor. And I can now save this so that when the user runs this query and they go up to their parameter and they backspace over actor and star, now they see all the list of their users. And now they can pick a user to filter on. I want to filter on Mike. I want to filter on Gosha, Joe Schmo, whatever. Or again, I can put the star back and see everything. So that's how that event type lookup file became. We did that for you, but this is how you do it yourself. And then again, I would take this and I would republish it. So it takes that lookup file and makes it available in your dashboard. And that's what this does, pure and simple. Okay. Now, again, a couple of quiz questions here to kind of get you in the mood. I'm almost done, by the way. To display a lookup table, I use the command CP. Nope, no, you don't. Okay, you don't have to use any command for that. You can actually look that lookup file. There is a command to review that lookup file. Okay. Search parameters allow me to pivot quickly to any metadata value. That's true. Search parameters can allow you to pivot quickly. So I can search by source category. I can search by source. I can search by anything I want. And then number 3, I use the save operator to create and save, if you will, a lookup table. That too is true. Now, the last couple labs here are pretty simple, because the last couple labs are that if you have AWS and you have CloudTrail, you could take this dashboard that you've built here and you can take it out of our environment and you can put it in your environment. And that's what this lab is trying to help you with. So if I go back here to my dashboard, and actually if I go where my dashboard is saved, so I'm going to go into my personal folder here, and in my personal folder, I want to find this dashboard. SOC, JWM, today's date. There. You'll see there's an option to export this. And you can take this file and you can export it. All of our visualizations are written in JSON. So you can download this file and export it out. Now, you can then open this up in a tool like, bear with me a second. There we go. Let's see what it opens it up in. Okay, good. It opened up in Firefox. Actually, I'd prefer to use a different tool, so humor me for a moment. Let's go to where it downloaded it. On my computer, I'm on a Mac. So here in my downloads, there is where that file is. I am going to tell it to open up specifically with some sort of a text editor. Okay, I'm going to open it with Visual Studio Code. You can open up in whatever text editor tool you want, whatever text editor tool you need. Now, again, this is all the settings, all the visualizations, all the graphs that are part of our dashboard. And I don't care if it's a new dashboard or an old dashboard, it's all there. Now, the trick is for each one of my dashboards in the query, it starts off with source category equals labs / AWS / CloudTrail. That is where our data it comes from in our environment. You may have called it something different. Your CloudTrail data, you may have called something different. So you need to change this part of the label so it points to your CloudTrail data. So you're going to do a series of find and replace on those source category tags. Then you're going to save this again. Then you're going to take this file and you can close it up. In fact, let me be right here and close it up. So you could save it, close it up. Then you're going to take that file. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Let me open it back up for a second here. You're going to copy all of its contents. So Again, open it up with Visual Studio Code. So I make my search and replace to replace all the code. Then I go in here and do like a Command A to select everything and Command C to copy. Then in your company's Sumo Logic environment, here in either your library or your personal folder, on this More Action button, you have the ability to import. And here in the import, you give this thing a name, whatever you want to call this dashboard. And here where the JSON is, you paste that JSON in. And then you can import this. And if you got the data sources right, you should see the data. It should populate. Now, there is one thing that's missing. Okay. One thing that's missing. Remember those lookups we created, those lookup queries, the one I just did for actor and the one that was previously done for event type? Well, those queries are in here. So in this lab, when you export and change this and all that stuff, here's the queries that you need to create your actor lookup table. And here's the query you need for your event listing, okay, event type. So that's those. As I said, you can copy those and paste those into your environment, create those queries, save those. And then, like I said, import your information. And then if you want to, you can even share it with other users. So you can share it. So when you export, here's a quiz question for you. Export outputs JSON format. That statement, as we all know, is true. Everything we write typically in our product is in JSON. Before importing, I must change the pointers to my data using some sort of a visual or text editor. Hopefully you realize that statement is true, right? You probably did not call your source category for your CloudTrail data lab/AWS/CloudTrail. And then question number 3 here, after importing, I cannot share the dashboard with others. That statement is false. You can obviously share a dashboard or share anything that you want, okay? Okay. Give me a quick second here. All right. So that is that lab. And again, I think it's a fairly straightforward lab. I don't know how many of you run an AWS CloudTrail, so not sure how many this is. The final lab in here, lab 8, is about threat intel. And we also, besides obviously having a partnership with Newstar, where you can look up and take an IP address and translate it to a latitude and longitude, we have a partnership with CrowdStrike. Now, CrowdStrike charges a little bit of money for their product. And I don't know if your organization has CrowdStrike or not, but with us, when you use Sumo Logic, we provide our CrowdStrike information for you. Now, what is CrowdStrike? CrowdStrike allows you to do a lookup right here, this line right here. And again, we're going to send in an IP address, and it's going to go to sumo/threat/cs, which we're going to send it to CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike is going to tell us the type of attack, or, it's going to tell us anything it knows about this IP address, the actor involved, the raw, the threat level, all of that fun stuff. In fact, if I go out to our documentation, help.sumologic.com, and I do a search for threat intel or threat indicators, and in my threat indicators, what I want is the frequently asked question, the FAQ. And so here we automatically can send IP addresses through CrowdStrike. So you don't have to worry about that. That's part of our offer to you. We will send it through CrowdStrike for our behalf. Now, you can send IP addresses, you can send domain names, URL, email addresses, all of this good stuff. And then CrowdStrike will tell us information back, like who are the actors? We have certain nation state actors or non-nation state actors. And it will tell us what kind of a threat is this. If we get a threat back of null or nothing, that means that CrowdStrike is not aware of it. If you get a threat strike of low, they are aware of it, but the threat is relatively low. If you get a threat back of high, again, you can get a sense for what's happening. So if I take lab 8 here and I take this final query, and if I copy it, and if I put it in here in my Sumo logic environment, bear with me a second, let me get out of this. Okay, so I create a new log search. And I paste this information in, and again, I want to run it for maybe the last 24 hours. What this is going to do is it's going to tell me IP addresses that are in my system and whether or not there is a threat to them. Let me do this. First of all, comment this one out. Let me comment this one out. So what I'm looking at here again is, hang on a second. Let's go out here. Comment out these lines too. So I can see the results of my lookup. So I'm looking up IP addresses, and here's the IP addresses, and I'm looking to see if any of them have a malicious confidence. That's not null. Again, not null means that CrowdStrike may not know about them, or maybe they're not a threat at all. So if I want to filter that stuff out, I can do that. And then I get back those that are considered something I need to focus on. So here's one that has a malicious confidence of low. And again, I can see the information about that malicious confidence of low, why it might be low, and things along those lines. So you can see specific IP addresses. I only have the one IP address in here, 1.0.0.1. And then basically what it's doing is it's looking that information up, let me know what's going on. Again, building that nice dashboard here to show me what's happening. Okay. And then we can run the outlier function. Now, the outlier function gives us some mathematical statistical ability to see what's going on. Let me just go ahead and comment this stuff out if you don't mind. And perhaps make it a little easier for you to see. There's not an easy way to uncomment out things. It's an easy way to comment out things. So my outlier typically gives me a series of data points where I can see here's my time slices, here's my count. It calculates an upper and lower value. And based on, again, how the outlier function works, and if I turn this into a line chart, I can see statistically here my data points, and the cloud behind it. The cloud behind it is my upper and lower boundary, and then these triangles denote that I have a point that's outside of the range. So let me change this. Instead of 24 hours, let me look at maybe the last 60 minutes. Might make it a little easier for you to see. Certainly run a little quicker. So I can see statistically if I have anything I need to concern myself with. Okay. So that's that query. And again, it's clocking out all 60 minutes here. There you go. I think it's, there it goes. It's done. It took 18 seconds here. So now I've got no threats here to worry about at this time. And of course I could change this up and make it, 3 hours or whatever I want. And can see statistically if I've got issues. Okay. That's what that lab is all about. And again, it uses CrowdStrike. So you can take any IP address through our system and you can look it up to see if it has a threat. Now, the last thing I want to mention to you guys is that, as I mentioned it to you earlier, I'm going to go and close up all these tabs. But I told you guys I would give you a little peek at our Cloud SIM Enterprise. So here in our training environment, if you open up the navigation panel, down here at the bottom, you see it says Cloud SIM Enterprise in the main menu. And if you click on Cloud SIM Enterprise, this gives you our heads up display. And I'm going to go ahead and change my size here of my, give me a second, there we go. Okay. So over here on the left, I can see we're ingesting a bunch of records. What are these records coming from? They're coming from your logs, right? We're going to take all this log. We're going to ingest this for you automatically once you set up your collectors and all that stuff. And so we're going to take in about 690,000 records in the last 24 hours. From that, we're going to analyze this using the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And so we're going to look and see how many signals that we have that have kicked off based on rules. In our case, we've got about 800 or so rules that we maintain for you that indicate that there's something wrong, something bad has happened. How bad depends on the rule. But the point is, we've got like over 800 rules that we have in our product. We update those rules every 2 weeks, unless there's an urgent rule that has to go out immediately. So at least every 2 weeks. As you can see, it's going to update based on, it's a live system. And then those signals turn into insights. And here I can see my insights by status as far as what's new, what I'm progress, what I'm working on. And I can see my insights as a timeline over here. Now, what probably drew your attention is this heads up display. So out here, going in a clockwise fashion, I can see my last 24 hours. And this blue area here, this blue wave, if you will, is my records. And from my records, we generated so many signals. Again, signals are usually, sorry about that. Signals are usually something that happened that's not good, that we want to call your attention to. And what our product does, which is different than a lot of SIMs, is that it takes these signals and it looks at them by entity. Entities could be a username, sorry, could be a username, could be a host name, could be an IP address. And we group those signals together by those things, and that gives us these insights. And these insights are trying to tell us a story of related signals of things that are happening. Now, over here on the right, I can see my latest insight, this one right here, okay? But I can see that latest insight. And then down here, I kind of have a sys log where I can see what people have done to insights, whether they've closed them, make them active and stuff like that. If I click up here where it says insights, I can see the various insights. And I can look at these insights if I want to. Now, if I click on this top insight, discovery with credential access and execution, if I click on that, now I can see the signals that made up this insight. So over here in the left, I can see I have an action drop down where I can assign this to somebody or some folks, what actions I want to take, whether it's new, it's in progress, it's status. And again, I can assign it to users. Now this insight is all about this IP address, this specific entity. And this overall score of this insight is severity is high. So we grade them and we give them certain values of high, low, whatever. Here, down here, I see the MITRE ATT&CK framework tactics and techniques associated with this insight. I can add more if I need to. I can add comments and document this. Now over here on the right is my timeline. This was my first signal that happened. And then over here, I can see there are other signals that happened. Down below, here are my signals. So I have a SAMR, enumeration of all users. And I'm not sure if you know what that means or not, but if I click on it and look at that signal, I can see that, Microsoft provided a protocol called SAMR for managing your security account manager. It's a remote protocol. Somebody accessed that system, okay? And so we can see this IP address, which is a client IP address, tried to access it on this IP address, which I'm going to assume is an Active Directory server. That's where SAMR usually goes. And again, what they were trying to do is they were trying to enumerate a listing of all of my users. So somebody was trying to access and get a name of all of my users. So that's the first signal that happened. And these signals have a score or a severity too. This one has a severity of 3. When my individual signals that make up my insight are greater than 12 over a 14-day period of time, that's what triggers my insight. So here I have an issue with a signal that was generated, SAML enumeration of users. That then generated into an Active Directory password spray attack. Somebody tried, if I go in here, I can see that somebody tried 10 different times logging in as this user from this IP address, trying to test and get passwords. And then if I want to, bear with me a second, let me go back here to my raw signals. Then what happened is somebody tried to use a password brute force attack on that same IP address. And then I can see we found a malware file here. So we can look at this particular signal and we see that it's a particular file that it detected and this type of threat. And I can see where that file exists and the hash of that file and all that fun stuff. So, and this who the user was that was doing this, good old Rico Dynamite. And so I can see a lot of information here. And this happens automatically in your system. We bring in the data from the various logs and systems of your environment. And then this does its magic and creates these insights so that you can start working on eradicating them, fixing them, and that sort of thing. So I said the training for this will be out next month, the end of next month, and we'll have classes from that point forward. 2 different classes, one about the analyst portion and then one about the administration portion. So just wanted to mention that to you. Are there any questions that you guys have about anything I've talked about? Any questions at all? All right. Well, let me say this. First and foremost, it's been a long day for you guys. You guys have been listening to me drone on and on. Of course, you also had a chance to see an expert panel, and I think hopefully you enjoyed that. But on behalf of myself and everybody at Sumo Logic, I want to thank you guys for this, because now it's time to turn your attention to the exam for this course. The exam is fairly straightforward, and I will be here to help proctor it. And so if you want to take the certification exam for this course, I'll show you how to get there. But before I go, I wanted to thank you all for your hard work today. It's been a long day, and I appreciate you guys hanging in there. So anything we can do, as I said, I put my email address out there before. If you need me to put it out there again in the chat box, I will. If you want to link up on LinkedIn, whatever I can do to help you, please let me know. But again, thank you all for your time. Let me go ahead and get you guys set up here with the certification exam. Again, if you need to, I need you to log out of our training environment. So I'm going to close all my tabs here. I want you to log out of Sumo Logic's training environment. Again, if you've forgotten how to do that. Thank you, Scott. Again, you go into your navigation panel here in the lower corner. You click on that name, training analyst with that number, and you click sign out. Then you're going to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment. So you're going to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment. So down here on the lower left, it has your name, first name, last name. Then you're going to click on the Home tab. And on the Home tab here with a house, then you click Certification. Then you click Get Certified. And this should take you into our learning management system. And in our learning management system, what you want to do is you want to find these security courses. These security courses. So look for security, the security tile. And then here we have the security exam in English, and we have the security exam in Japanese. Again, you click on the security exam in English. I'm assuming most of you are going to take it in English, not all. You'll have to register, click this registration button. Instantly, you are registered. Then you can go in here and look at the directions. There are only 22 questions here, and the passing score is 70%. This is a newer exam. We try to be a little easier here on you. So 22 questions, 70 passing scores of 70. Again, fill in the blanks, matching text, all of that good stuff. And so when I click next, I'm going to see, here's my exam questions, my timer. And I can either click on Start Assessment or I can do whatever. So how can you see where users are logging in across the world, right? We can do that using geo lookup tables. That's what we do. We create those maps. We use that new star type thing. In monitoring user activity lab, you entered a wildcard in the parameter event for event type. Why is that wildcard necessary? Okay. The reason is that the query will not run unless you've entered a value. And that value in this case is a wildcard, meaning I want to see everything. But the query will not run. That's why you get this field is required. You got to put a wildcard or some field that it matches. Now I'm going to scroll to the bottom, just as I did before, and I'm going to go ahead and submit my test. And you'll notice that I got the first two right, and the rest of them I got wrong. But please, if you pass this, or when you pass this, don't forget to hit the submit button so it writes it to your profile. Okay, so it's stored in your profile, and then you can go into your profile and you can see your certificate, and you can frame it and put it up on your I love me wall. And if you want to, you can also add it to your LinkedIn profile. Okay, so you can do all that fun stuff. Take bragging rights. Now, as they mentioned in earlier today, I firmly agree and believe that in today's world with security and all that stuff, there is, and particularly in technology and in IT, you're learning every day. It's a constant struggle to try to keep up with things. But again, hopefully today you learned some things with Sumo Logic, and hopefully you can use the tool to help you and your company with regards to security things. Again, if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I am going to be quiet, let you guys take your exam. Good luck. I'll be here until you all log out. Last person logs out, then I'll log out. Please be safe. I hope to see you in a future class some point in time. But otherwise, thanks a lot for your hard work today. That's all I got. Thanks. I'll stop the recording.